call the April 21st budget public hearings, Board of Supervisors meeting to order. There is one agenda change under the public hearings. Item 2A is canceled. That was the proposed real estate tax increase. That one is canceled. Next is going to...
Before you go to the next agenda item, I just want to remind you that because this is a remote meeting, each of the board members needs to announce their physical location.
That's right. My apologies. Board of Supervisors meeting to order. There is one agenda change under the public hearings. Item 2A is canceled. That was the proposed real estate tax. Andrew, can you cancel? Next is going to...
Before you go to the next agenda item, I just want to remind you some feedback if you're live streaming the YouTube. Board members needs to announce their physical.
All right, we'll start with District 1. Mr. Johnson.
You know, if this county had some decent broadband, this would be a lot easier.
Yes, it would.
I am in, I'm on Albano Road in Barbersville, Virginia at my home.
Okay. Mr. White.
Yes, I'm on Berry Run Road in Orange, Virginia at my home.
Mr. Goodwin.
I am on Rapidan Road in my home in Orange.
Mr. Frame.
I'm at Woodland Trail in Locust Grove at my home.
And I am at the Orange County Airport, my pseudo office. All right, now we will move along. Item 2B is a public hearing, proposed tax rates for calendar year 2020. And Mr. Voorhees, are you going to do the presentation for this, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. We'll go ahead and start this brief 7-slide PowerPoint. Andrew, if you could pull that up. Spell check is complete. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the public hearing introduction for the proposed 2020 tax rates for the fiscal 21 budget. Next slide. And so under the Code of Virginia, when an effective tax rate increase is anticipated as a result of property reassessment, we have to do a calculation to determine if there's an actual increase in the effective tax rate and an associated public hearing. And so this has got to be a separate public hearing, advertised at least 30 days prior to the hearing itself, and it cannot be held at the same time as the annual budget public hearing. But as the chairman mentioned, we do not have to hold that because we do not have an effective tax increase. An equalized or lowered tax rate has to be calculated when we do a revaluation to make sure that we do not generate more than 101% of the previous year's revenue, excluding new construction. If we do end up with more than 101% of revenue based on the previous evaluation, then that's considered an effective tax rate increase. We have to state that, state the rate, the amount of increase, and propose the maximum budget increase included in the advertisement. So that's what we would have to do if we did not equalize. Next slide. And so what we did do is advertise on March 19th. I did say next slide. Yep, number 3. We did advertise on March 19th and March 26th the result of our general reassessment in accordance with the Code of Virginia. And it showed that we would have a proposed tax rate not to exceed 8 cents above the calculated equalized rate of 72 cents per $100 of assessed valuation. So that would have been an 80-cent rate That was the advertisement. As budget development continued and the state of emergency was issued by the county, the Commonwealth, and the COVID-19 situation became more apparent, the budget committee worked to pare back the budget and recommended that we lower the proposed rate to the equalized rate. So with that recommendation, the public hearing is no longer necessary. We have an equalized rate of 72 cents. We need to make it clear that that consists of the general property tax rate of 61 cents plus the countywide fire and EMS district levy of 11 cents. We're splitting that out now, countywide district, but when you put those two together, the 61 and 11 makes 72, and that's how we come to the notion that we have an equalized rate. So that's effectively no tax rate increase. Next slide. And so you see here the old versus new assessed values. For 2019, land value was 1.817 million or 1.817 billion. The 2020 evaluation is 1.856. That's a 2.13% increase. The improvements are 22.71% increase. The public service companies about the same. Mobile homes about the same. We have some exemptions and reductions and deferrals calculated, and the net taxable value change is right about $600 million or 14.78%. Of this, 59 million is new construction, and we can exclude it from the calculation. Next slide. And there's the calculation of what a 101% maximum levy is. It's 32 million. We show the net 2020 taxable value. We take out the construction value at 59 million. We adjust for 2020 and divide the maximum allowed revenue by the adjusted 2020 value, and that gets us to our 72% or 72 cents. So that's the calculation. Next slide. Here's all the rates, and you can see the real estate rate is at 61, the fire and EMS levy is 11, and all the other rates stay the same. Next slide. And so that's how we arrive at the 72 cents equalized rate, and that basically shows how we got there. Happy to answer any questions. And if you're the public, you may comment on this by mail to attention Allison Simpson, Post Office Box 111, Orange, Virginia 22960, or by email to asimpson, ASIMPSON, at orangecountyvirginia.gov. They must be received by 5 p.m. on Monday, the 27th, 2020, as the board intends to review the public comment and take action on Tuesday, April 28th, 2020. So board members, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I would have a comment to make, and I make this just to so everybody's on the same page, and there's no reflection on you because you dropped in the middle of this process. The board advertised the 80-cent rate basically as a placeholder, because we really at that point didn't know, we hadn't got there was a lot of information from the state we didn't have yet, and our own budget was in sort of an unusual amount of flux. So we decided to just advertise the as though there was no reassessment, just advertise the 80 cents, assuming we would revise it down. We didn't know how much at that point, and then when the COVID emergency came up, we made the decision then that it was going to have to be flat, and that was that. I just wanted to make that just add that bit of enlightenment there.
I have a comment. Should that be orangecountyva.gov? instead of virginia.gov?
That's a very good point. The email address at orangecountyva.gov.
Right.
Thank you for catching that.
All right. Any other questions or comments?
No.
All right. So at this point, the public hearing is open and people can make comments up until the 27th, like the county administrator said. All right, we will move on.
You need to recess this one or just leave it open?
Leave it open.
Okay.
It's open for 2 weeks. All right, then the next one is item 2C, the proposed operating and capital budgets for fiscal year 2021. Ms. Bradley, are you or the budget subcommittee or both going to do this presentation?
I was going to run through it, but I would be happy for the budget subcommittee to chime in at any time.
All right, very good. Go right ahead then.
All right, if I can get the first slide. I just wanted to start out by saying that the FY21 budget development was informed by the board's adopted financial policies, and they were last amended in July of 2016. And this particular slide is just a reminder of our overall philosophy and the goals of those policies. The policies are divided into 5 categories: tax revenue generation, financial operations, debt policies, capital improvement plan, and reserve policies. Next slide. The budget guidance that we received from the board back in December directed that the new budget be developed in light of the financial policies and in keeping with the limits, the debt limits and so forth that are set out in those policies, the reserve policy as well. In keeping with the Board of Supervisors tax revenue generation policy, there is no effective increase for any local tax rate in the proposed budget. The main change in the structure of the FY21 budget is the separation of a portion of the real estate levy, and that is 11 cents per hundred in real estate value will be going to directly support the activities of fire, EMS, and emergency services. A new fund was created to account for those activities, and its main source of revenue is that special levy for 11 cents, but it's also supported by the ambulance revenue, our revenue recovery program, a few state grants that are particularly for fire, EMS, or emergency management. And the new fund includes expenses for operational, capital, and debt service, all related to fire and EMS. The change in that presentation of the budget was made to provide transparency and to better illustrate the value of those particular services. Next slide. This slide shows a comparison of the consolidated budget. This is the budget for the entire county, including the schools.
Glenda, real quick, could we back up for just a second?
Sure.
I think it's important that we note that 11 cents is for the county fire EMS operations, not for the volunteer fire companies, correct?
Well, the contributions to the volunteers are within that fund as well.
Right, but it does not wholly fund those companies. It's only a contribution from us to assist them with their operations.
That's correct.
Okay.
Send that
Thank you.
donation check in.
So on the consolidated budget, that is the entire county budget, including the schools. There's a little more detail there than the fund level because we're breaking out capital and debt. And there are a few things that I thought I'd want to point out. One is you can see that the general fund decreased by 4.4 million. but that is offset by the new fire and EMS levy fund, which is 4 lines down at 5.5 million. So you really have to look at those in combination. Secondly, there are 4 major capital projects included in the budget, proposed to be financed for a total of $14,962,000. Those you can see on the lines that are titled Capital Projects 2020 Financing. There's a $3 million on the county side, 8.8 million on the school side, and then within the landfill fund is another 3 million to construct a new landfill cell. The new debt to support those projects is also included in this budget, and you can see that which is split between county and school debt service. And we have also added another round of school bus replacement cycle financing. So the second category from the bottom is school debt service. That is debt service that's actually budgeted on the school side. But that's increased by 266,000 for another round of school bus purchases. And then at the bottom of the slide, I just subtracted out the major capital projects to give you more of an idea of what it would look like if it wasn't for that skewing the numbers. So we ended up, when you take that out, with an increase overall of 2.14%. Next slide. So these are the 4 capital projects that are included. The landfill expansion cell, 3 million for the broadband initiative, 2.5 million for the Bluebell building rehab, and 6.3 million for Gordon Barber Elementary, which is an addition roof. This particular chart does include the issuance cost as well. But you can see that the grand total is just under 15 million. And the debt service included for these in the FY21 budget is $1,225,000 there at the bottom. Next slide. This slide just shows you how the financing works within our existing financial policies, and that we do still stay within our limits on those financial policies. The first chart shows existing and proposed debt, but the latter 3 all show how, even with the new debt, we stack up with our policy guidelines or limits. So the limits are indicated in the rust color line for the 10-year payout. We like to make sure that we're paying off at least 55% of the principal over a 10-year period looking out, and we're well within that. Our debt to assessed value ratio stays below 2.5, and we're well below that as well. The debt service to expenditures is the ratio that we always seem to be the tightest on, but you can see that even with this proposed debt, we're under the 12%. Next slide. This chart just shows the consolidated budget revenue sources, and you can see that general property taxes makes up a big slice of the pie. This is not just real estate on this chart. It would include personal property and all other types of property tax revenue. The state categorical aid is large in the grand scheme of things, and of course, most of that would be tied to schools, budgets, and social services as well. In this particular year, we have the financing proceeds, which makes up 13%, but that's a little bit of a one-off. We wouldn't have that if it wasn't a year with the big capital projects. Next slide. This is a chart that addresses the goal of lessening the tax burden on residential real estate. One of the financial policies says that we need to make sure that we are monitoring our reliance on residential real estate and trying to lessen that burden. So you can see that the 21 budget is supported by 22.83% from residential real estate. So a lot of the other, there are the commercial real estate also provides in that orange color. Ag provides part of the budget, but you can see that the biggest part of the budget is provided from other revenues other than real estate. And this particular chart was adjusted for those to remove those major capital projects so that it would be more comparable to the previous year. Next slide. This one shows the general fund revenue comparison. And again, for comparison's sake, I did combine the general fund with the fire and EMS fund for the 21 proposed. And you can just see where any new revenue is coming from. There's about 1.4 from real estate, other local taxes, 329,000. Now, this was prior to COVID, so there is a chance that we need to come back and amend this budget at some point when we get a better feel for how that's going to impact us. I'm thinking sales tax, because that and meals and lodging taxes are part of that category. Also under charges for service, that went up, but it was mainly due to the ambulance revenue. So you can see that our total new revenue was about 2.2 million. We are proposing to use 2.6 million in our fund balance reserves. And that makes the total budget increase about 5.6%. Next slide. This particular chart shows the proposed use of undesignated general fund revenues. So this one does not include the fire and EMS fund because the revenues in that fund are designated now for fire and EMS. So you kind of have to keep that in mind when you're looking at this. But you can see that the vast majority of the board's discretionary spending is on education. Next is debt service, and about 77% of that debt service piece is actually for schools, related to schools. So when you add that to the education operations, what we have for schools is actually over 50% of the undesignated revenues. Next is public safety. And again, the public safety would be a larger piece if it included fire and EMS, but with that removed, it's only at 11%. Next slide. So this is a similar slide in that it shows our local expenditures by function. And I did combine the fire and EMS with the general fund just because it is a comparison and to keep things in line. But you can see again that education is where the majority of our expenses are. When you combine the fire and EMS, next is public safety, and then debt services next. Next slide. And this slide just gives you an idea of our fund balance status with the proposed budget. So we looked at fund balance and where it was as of last June 30th, which is the last time we officially measured our fund balance. And I have looked at the current fiscal year and done some estimates for revenues and expenditures. I used my worst case scenario for the revenues, to be on the safe side, but even using that worst case, in all 3 instances, we're still within our reserves policy as adopted by the board. Next slide. That's all I really have. Are there any questions from the board?
No.
And nope, looks good to me. Any other comments? All right. In that case, at this time, we'll open the public hearing. And because this meeting is being conducted remotely, there's no opportunity for physical public access to the meeting and no opportunity for public comment. However, all interested persons are invited to submit written comments for the board's consideration. Written comments may be submitted by mail to attention Allison Simpson, P.O. Box 111, Orange, Virginia 22960, or by email to asimpson@orangecountyva.gov and must be received by 5 p.m. on Monday, April 27th, 2020. The board intends to close a public hearing and consider this matter at its regular meeting on Tuesday, April 28th, 2020, after receiving any written comments. All written comments will be read during the meeting on April 28th and entered into the meeting minutes. All right. At this point, we will go ahead and move to 2D, which is proposed amendment to extend the due date for first half taxes. Allison or Mr. Latchney?
Mr. Chairman, I think this one's mine.
Okay.
What you have in front of you is an ordinance that would, our normal due date on real estate taxes is June 5th. The ordinance changes the due date to June 20th. There's a reason for that, which I'll get to in a minute, but grants a 30-day grace period where there's no penalties and interest. So it gives the citizens up till July 20th to pay. There's multiple attorney general opinions out there and at least one court ruling that we don't have any ability to waive interest and penalties once they attach. So what this does is it rolls out the date where interest and penalties start accruing till July. The reason we didn't roll the due date down into July is because then it would have affected our fiscal year. Those revenues wouldn't have been due until the next fiscal year, which Glenda said would really screw up our accounting. So we left the due date in the current fiscal year, but then they gave the grace period on the payment where no penalties and interest would accrue. Therefore, there's no waiver issue on penalties and interest because they simply don't attach until after July 20th. So with that, I'll answer any questions anyone has.
Okay. Any questions? All right. And the same would apply for the public hearing on this one, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And just to make sure that we cover everything, I'll go ahead and read that again. So there's no question by constituents. Because this meeting is being conducted remotely, there is no opportunity for physical public access to the meeting and no opportunity for public comment. However, all interested persons are invited to submit written comments for the board's consideration. Written comments may be submitted by mail to attention Allison Simpson, P.O. Box 111, Orange, Virginia 22960, or by email to asimpson@orangecountyva.gov and must be received by 5 p.m. on Monday, April 27th, 2020. Board intends to close public hearing and consider this matter at its regular public meeting on Tuesday, April 28th, 2020. After receiving any written comments, all written comments will be read during the meeting on April 28th, 2020 and entered into the meeting minutes. And with that being said, I would entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.
Have a good evening, gentlemen.
Thank you.
All too.
Good evening.
Thank you.